Liberal Senator Andrew Bragg has released a new book responding to the 2017 Uluru Statement from the Heart. The statement was released 4 years ago and called for a constitutionally enshrined Indigenous advisory body to oversee treaty making and truth-telling. The book makes the case for constitutional reform, arguing that the Liberal side of politics can take the lead on Indigenous advancement. And Liberal Senator Andrew Bragg joins me now. I have the book in hand. Good to see you. I've got to say, I haven't read it yet, but I have read the reviews and the excerpts in The Australian. It seemed like at least the Turnbull government did not want to take this on. They completely shelved it. Is there any impetus within the Morrison government to do this?
Well, at the moment, we've got a co-design process which is running by Ken Wyatt, which is looking at how a voice could be deployed. And I think it really is designed, in my mind, to meet two things. Firstly, you want to have a voice to give people on the ground agency and control, to hear their voices. But also, I think there is a symbolic need here we need to deliver on, which is a debate that John Howard kicked off on constitutional recognition back in 2007.
How important is that it's Indigenous-led and there's not this top-down paternalistic approach?
We've made this mistake for the last 250 years of thinking that we know better than Indigenous people on matters that relate to their affairs. And so the whole point of having a voice is to make that a bottom-up process where Indigenous people can have a say on policies and laws which affect them, which is, I would have thought, pretty straightforward.
I mean, the problem is with your side of politics that there are, constitutional conservatives.
No, I'm a constitutional conservative.
Okay, so what's the case for change then?
Well, I think if you were to pursue this to constitutional reform, which is where this debate started with John Howard, and therefore I think it should end with constitutional reform, I think you should have a fairly modest constitutional amendment to ensure that the Commonwealth does consult with Indigenous people on laws and policies which relate to them, and then you could legislate the voice.
Your colleagues don't agree with you. Why not, do you think?
There are mixed views about this, but there is a good process which Ken Wyatt is running where people have been free to put in submissions. I put in a submission. They close on Friday. Let's see what people say after all the submissions are in.
Are we going to get there?
Well, I think we have to, and I think the question is, what is it going to be? Now, the process we're following here is to co-design the voice and then to consider legal and constitutional arrangements. So it's a two-step process. We're almost halfway through.
Feels like we're about 20 steps in.
It's taken 15 years, right, since John Howard put this on the map, and we really need to deliver this because the Indigenous people won't wait forever, and nor should they. I mean, the Uluru Statement is a very good statement. It's a unifying statement. It's saying that Indigenous people want to be in the Australian Constitution. I would have thought for patriots, that's a pretty good message.
It was dismissed so quickly by Malcolm Turnbull. Was that a mistake?
I think that was mishandled, and I think it was a real shame that the Uluru Statement was dealt with in that way. The fact is, though, at the time there was much less detail about what the voice would be. I mean, Noel Pearson had discussed it in broad terms, and now there is a lot more meat on the bones, and we know what the voice would be. It would be about providing agency and control on the ground. And I think that is quite a conservative and quite a liberal notion. And so I'm more optimistic that we could pursue this agenda now.
For many Australians, this argument or debate about constitutional recognition seems really academic. And the question I get constantly is, what does it change for the lives of Indigenous Australians?
Well, it's quite simple. So we have 18 different laws on the Commonwealth statute books which relate only to Indigenous people. Indigenous people are the only Australians that have special laws made for them. And so this is about saying if you have special laws, you have to have a special system to manage those laws, to consult those people on how those laws are deployed, native title, land rights, heritage protection. At the moment, we just make the laws and we don't really have a system to engage with the people. So that is a liberal. So I think there is a liberal argument, and that is that you consult people when you make special laws.
What do you think about the changes, and this is a bit separate from your book, I acknowledge that, looking at changes in the curriculum? Warren Mundine, for example, has criticised these changes and how First Nations people is taught in schools. Do you have a problem with that?
It's not a choice. I mean, this is not England. This is Australia. And so Indigenous heritage and culture is part of this land, just as the British institutions are, just as the multicultural tenor is of our country. As Noel Pearson has talked about, we're a three-part country: Indigenous heritage, British institutions, and a multicultural gift. So you need to tell the story about all of those things. And until you do that, the country is incomplete. I mean, Tony Abbott used to say the Constitution is incomplete until we recognise Indigenous people. And I think that's right.
Do you think there's a political willingness to get this done on both sides, but there is such a fear of failure?
I don't think there's any politics in this, Laura. I think this is an issue that is genuinely
really?
not...
No politics in it?
I don't think it's about votes. I think that the reality is...
There seems to be a huge fear of failure and the political problems that would bring if you failed.
I think people are afraid to wade into this debate. Certainly I've thought about it very carefully before doing so, because people are worried about saying the wrong thing. But I think unless we engage on these issues, 3% of Australians, which is the Indigenous population, are not going to be able to muster the support for a change to the Constitution, even if it was a minimal one, unless the rest of the Australian nation care about it and engage on these issues. And I think it's terribly important. Unless we fix these issues, these issues about national identity, it will dog our country.
You're not the first person to say that, but you've laid it out eloquently in your book. Andrew Bragg, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Laura.